Okay, so today we're working on 7-7. This is just, the only thing we're doing different is adding a second variable into our trinomials. And these are the steps that are on almost all of our notes from 5.6, 5.5, 5. Or not 5, 7.5, 6, 7, and then I think 8 as well. But if you want a really good example of how to do these, this is step by step on what you need to do, okay? So I want us to look at the first example because we did do 2 of these on the warm-up. So I think we could start solving right away. Step 1, you need to make sure it's in standard form. It's already in standard form. This is what it looks like. Then step 2 tells you to factor out a GCF. Well, example number 1, we don't have a GCF, so we move on to step 3. Here, there's no GCF. Step 3, you're going to take factors of 2x squared y squared that add up to a negative 3xy. So let me show you over here what we're doing. We're going to multiply the first and third terms, and we get 2x squared y squared. Okay. Now what we have to do is we have to find factors that multiply and get 2x squared y squared. But then we find those 2 factors, you take them and see if they add up to that middle term, negative 3xy. Okay. So if it doesn't work, if you try 2 factors and it doesn't work down here, then try 2 different ones. So does anyone know what factors equal a 2, but then will also, when you add them, equal a negative 3? Eli. Negative 1 and negative 2. So negative 1xy and negative 2xy. Asher,
Yes.
maybe next time ask me. No. Okay, so let's see, negative 1xy plus a negative 2xy, they do equal a negative 3xy. So we have the correct factors. Now, we're going to take those factors and we're going to write them out and rewrite our problem. And we're going to just take the first and the last terms and we bring them down. The middle term is now 2 terms. 2 terms that total the middle term when you add them together. So we're going to write x squared. That's our first term. Our middle term is separated by a negative 1xy and a negative 2xy. And then we write down our last term, a positive 2y squared. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is step 4. We're going to group them together. So when we group them together, it looks like this. Okay. And we are now going to factor out the greatest common factor. So the greatest common factor between these 2 terms is x. So we divide them both by x. That greatest common factor goes on the outside of the parenthesis. And when we rewrite our problem after we divide both terms, we get x minus y, or 1y. Yes.
Negative 1xy plus negative 2xy don't make negative 3x squared y squared.
Because you don't add exponents when you're adding like terms. You only add exponents when you're multiplying. Does that make sense? Okay, yes.
Oh, there's the right. So
Oh, the X minus.
the negative 1xy plus no.
X minus 2y.
Send Eli Clark to the front office for just a minute.
Sure. Okay, so now we are going to factor the greatest common factor out of the second binomial. It is going to be a negative 2y. Remember, if this starts with a negative, you need to factor out the negative. So I'm going to put my negative 2y outside of the parentheses, and now I'm going to divide each term by my greatest common factor. So this one is x, and this one is negative y. And I could tell that I'm doing it right because these end up being the same. So I'm going to write out my final answer as x minus 2y times x minus y. Any questions? Okay. I want you all to try practice 1 following these steps. If you have questions, ask me and I will guide you if it is confusing, okay? Okay, so this is what you should have gotten for the practice number 1. Are there any questions? Okay, let's move on to examples. Example 2 and practice 2. The only difference between the first two and these two is that now you have a coefficient greater than 1. All right, so the process is still the same. We're going to multiply the first and third term, and we get negative 12 x squared y squared. Okay, so you're going to find factors that multiply to get 12x squared y squared, and you're going to use those factors and add them up to get negative 1xy. Okay. So I already know two factors where if you subtract them, you could get a 1. Does anyone know what those two factors are?
4 and 3.
Yes, 3 and 4. So we have to figure out which one is negative, which one is positive. So
Negative
4.
3 minus negative 4 plus
3.
1 plus
Okay.
3 and 4.
yeah, so your 3 is going to be positive. Your 4 is going to be negative because 3 minus 4 is a negative 1. Okay. So let's go ahead and plug that into our equation. Take the first term, it stays the same. Your second term is split up into these two down here. So a positive 3xy and negative 4xy. And then we bring down our negative 6y squared. Okay. Now we're going to group them. Now we're going to find the greatest common factor of each set of binomials. So the greatest common factor here is x. So I divide them both by x. Okay. The greatest common factor with the second binomial is, anyone know?
Negative 2y.
Yeah, negative 2y. You guys are getting the hang of this. So we have negative 2y, and then when we divide, we have 2x plus 3y, which is the same as this one.
If they don't add up, does that just mean you have to factor more terms on one side?
Okay, that's a good question. If they don't add up, either maybe you forgot to pull out the greatest common factor ahead of time, or you might have the wrong factors from this step right here, but they should always be the same. Or it could mean it's prime. Okay, so I want you all to try practice 2 on your own. Okay, so we have our factors for practice 2. So I'm just going to write out okay, and then we have to group together. Greatest common factor here is a 2x. And we're left with x minus y. greatest common factor here is a 3. Nope. A 3y. And so we're left with x minus y. So our final answer would be 2x plus 3, x minus y. Okay. We're going to do example and practice 3. Okay. So let's go ahead and do example 3, unless there's any questions. Okay, I put quite a few on here because I want you to practice them and be ready. Okay. All right, so we're going to, and these get progressively harder. So negative 15 times 4 is negative 60. Okay. So we have to find factors that equal negative 60 x squared y squared, and those same factors that add up to get negative 4xy. All right, so it's going to take a little bit of thought here. Yes. Okay, so we said negative 10 and 6. So 6xy and negative 10xy. That is correct. Okay. All right. So I want you to go ahead and plug it into, substitute those terms for negative 4xy, and then I want you to group and I want you to factor. Okay, so go ahead and try that. Okay, so on practice 2, this should have been a 3y right here instead of just 3. Okay, now at 3, this is where I'm at so far. We found our factors. I'm starting to factor out the GCF. And when I do that, I get 2x times 2x plus 3y here. I factored out a negative 5y, and I end up with 2x plus 3y. Okay. So now we have 2x minus 5y times 2x plus 3y. All right, any questions?
Can you slow down?
Wait,
Hold on just a second. Okay. So this is what you should get for practice 3. The only complication with practice 3 is finding those factors with such a large number. Okay, and so you will have some where the factors, you'll have a large product and you'll have to find the factor of those two. Okay, let's go on to the back. The difference with the problems on the back is that you have to factor out the greatest common factor. This does need to stay at 38, and I'm going to show you why in just a minute. All right, when we factor out the greatest common factor here, it's going to be 2x, that's it, 2x. There's not a y in the first term, so you can't factor out. Okay, so now I'm going to rewrite my problem as 2x times 4x squared minus 19xy minus 5y squared. Once you do that, we have a problem that is similar to the ones we had on the first side. Okay, so we are going to multiply negative 5y squared times 4x squared, and we get negative 20x squared y squared. So what are factors of this product that add up to a negative 19? Yeah, 1xy minus 20xy. And that gives you negative 19xy, which is what we have right here. Oh, yeah. Like this? Hold on just a second. So we have 1x, oops. So 1xy and negative 20xy. And then we need those factors to add up to negative 19xy.
It froze.
It froze? Okay. Okay, so here are our factors that we have. And so we're going to rewrite our problem. So you have 2x times 4x squared, and then we're going to use these two factors, plus 1xy minus 20xy minus 5y squared. Okay, and so now we're going to group them like this. Okay, now you're going to find your greatest common factors. It does get a little bit tricky when you pulled out the greatest common factor first, because you're like, what do I do with that number? But I'll show you right now. So we are going to factor each one of these. So we can factor both of these by an x, and we can factor both of these by a negative 5y. Okay, so what's going to happen is this first term that we factored out, just put this over here in parentheses, and now factor everything else out. So you have x times 4x plus y, and then you have a negative 5y times 4x plus y.
So this is the same thing as 7.6, exactly. It's making it longer.
Yes, because you have that extra variable to think about. Okay, now we're going to write our final answer like this: 2x times x minus 5y times 4x plus y. Okay, any questions? All right, hold on. I want you guys to move on to practice 4. Make sure you factor out the greatest common factor first. Okay, so practice 4 was not similar to the problems that we've been doing. So this was simple. It was even on our warm up. So this is just a regular one without that second variable. So we're going to move down to example 5. It looks like example 5 is going to be similar to example 4 up here. So let's go ahead and work this out. We need the greatest common factor to be factored out first. Does anyone know what that is?
Can I volunteer?
No.
Only if you think you know it. Okay, the greatest common factor is 3x.
No, you won't.
So we're going to divide everything by 3x. Okay, so So 57, I think I'm right. I just want to make sure. Yep. Okay. So now that we have that factored out, I want you to go ahead and finish factoring this one out on your own. Okay. Okay. Any questions on example 5? Okay. The last one is practice 5. This is probably as far as we're going to get, so we will not be doing lesson 7-9 today. We'll save that one for next week, but please don't lose your notes. So right now, we're going to finish up this practice problem, and then I'll go over what the homework is. Okay, so everybody work on this one right now. Okay, when you're finished, I want you to check practice 5 and see how you did. Okay. And then if you have any questions, let me know. Okay. And that is the end of 7-7.